All right, so this video is going to be part 3 of our Microsoft Sentinel demonstration here. I actually wanted to take it to the next level with this particular video. So, of course, what you're seeing right in front of you now is my Microsoft Azure tenant. And what we're going to do is just explore Microsoft Sentinel a little bit deeper. I've actually added a lot of different components to this lab since my last video. So without further ado, let's go on ahead and get started. But the first thing I wanted to do is just go on ahead and go to, well, actually, let's talk about Azure Arc first. So Azure Arc is essentially a way for me to add on-premises resources into Azure. And essentially all three of these devices that you have in front of you are installed with something called the Azure Monitor Agent. What you see here is one of my Windows 11 workstations. You have my eCorp domain controller, which I've talked about in previous labs, and you also have a Ubuntu syslog collector, which I had to add recently so that I could use it as a middleman to get syslog um, essentially log files from my pfSense firewall and then send this over to Azure. But anyways, now that I've talked about this a little bit, let's go to Microsoft Sentinel. So go to Sentinel. We will go to the Sentinel workspace. This other workspace that I have here is actually it's completely, um, I guess you could say it's really a separate sort of lab that I've been working on. I know a lot of different labs, but uh, I will try to make this as easy to understand as possible, so I don't confuse the different topologies that I have at the different labs. But anyways, what I wanted to show you is the data connectors that I added. So I added a few. Um, as soon as that loads. All right, so I've got M365. I actually signed up for a Office 365 E5 trial, mainly so that I could get Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, Defender for Cloud Apps, etc., and then add that to the lab. So as you can see here, you've got Endpoint, got a few logs here, got Microsoft Defender for Identity, Defender for Office 365, you got the other ones. Let's see here. These are some that I also added recently. So I've got the security events for Legacy Age. I've got syslog for AMA, which I was just talking about a moment ago, specifically with the Ubuntu middleman syslog VM that I created. And then you've got tenant-based Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and then yeah, another syslog one. But anyways, exploring syslog a little bit, as you can see, I've got several different alerts. And just to make a little bit more sense out of this, I'm gonna go on ahead and open that Ubuntu VM that I was talking about that's serving as the syslog middleman. So let me go on ahead and log back into it. And the reason why I had to make this virtual machine is because without any sort of like public IP or anything like that, pfSense doesn't really have a way to natively forward over to Sentinel without using some sort of solution, which in their particular case here is going to be the Azure Monitor agent. So go on ahead and log into that. And so one thing that I can do very, very quickly is run this command here. And what this will do is essentially give me some information about the Azure Monitor agent, uh, really just making sure that's turned on, of course, because if it's not turned on, then it's not going to be able to collect logs from pfSense. So that is the main thing that I wanted to show you here. But also another thing that I can do is check the R syslog service, and as you can see, it is collecting log information. You'll see that this cannot connect because the machine was off overnight, so I'm going to see a whole lot of those logs in Azure here shortly. But anyway, those are two things that I just wanted to show you in regards to the Ubuntu VM. But anyways, on to the next part. Now we are back in Azure. So the first thing that we will do now that we are back in Azure is to go to the Open Connector page, and then what we will do is just take a look at a couple different things. So to the left, you'll see the amount of syslog logs that have already been ingested. And then what you see to your right is what's called a data collection rule. And essentially, this data collection rule in particular is configured to accept any alert that has the minimum severity, which would be in this case debug. I believe it goes all the way up to like emergency or something like that. But anyways, essentially what this is saying is collect all logs from the Ubuntu middleman. So now what we will do is go to log analytics, and we will run just a couple of basic queries. I actually have them here in my query history. But just for the sake of the lab, I'll type it out. So I'll just do syslog and then take, wrong symbol, take, I guess 100, and then run that. And then what you will see here is the last 100 logs from syslog. So as you can see, you're going to see a whole lot of host down logs. That's normal because the pfSense was turned off. Not the pfSense, but well, I guess technically both the pfSense and the middleman were turned off because I do not leave this on overnight. So that's why all these host down logs are here. And again, that Ubuntu only really serves as a middleman anyway to collect those logs. So for now, anyway, at least from the top 100 and in the last 24 hours, there shouldn't be a whole lot of activity going on here. But that's a way that you can gather some sys logs. And of course, you can also configure these logs by computer name. In this case, you only see two of them, pfSense, and then the name of the Ubuntu box. And then you've got severity level, informational. Most of these are going to be informational. And then warnings, host IP, collector host name, the type, and then the resource ID. But the next thing I want to do is actually run a query from a different table. And that table is going to be the security incident table, where I'll just do take 10. And so the reason why we want to focus on this table is because, not last 24, let's do last 28. The reason why we want to do this table is because this accidentally happened yesterday, but I actually ended up triggering a security alert after trying to onboard one of the devices that I have in Defender for Endpoint to Defender. So this execution incident on one endpoint took place because of a onboarding PowerShell script that's signed by Microsoft, mind you, and it was marked as suspicious. And so that's why this particular alert is here. And what I want to do is actually kind of talk about that alert and the different sorts of information that it can provide from a blue team perspective. But before that, what I'm going to do is go over to M365 Admin Center just to show you the O365 tenant that I set up. So that's actually what we will do right now. All right, so now we are in the M365 Admin Center, and this is probably the least important page in terms of the lab demonstration. But I just wanted to show you that there is an active M365 tenant here. As you can see to your left, you've got different blades such as users, teams, marketplace, etc. As you can see here, the accounts that we've synced over from on-prem AD are here. But what I wanted to take a look at is just real quickly the different sorts of admin centers that we have access to, and particularly what we are going to be focusing on is the security tab. And then we've got Microsoft Purview, Intune. You've got the Intra Identity tab, which oftentimes people mistake for Intune sometimes. And then you've got Exchange, SharePoint, and Teams. But anyways, I guess I can also talk about the licensing. So in order to actually run any of this, or all of this, I should say, really, you don't necessarily need an Intune license, but I want to incorporate Intune just so I can play around with autopilot specifically in onboarding devices. Then you've got Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Plan 2, and then you've got O365 E5. So that's really the minimum that it took in order to run everything for the purpose of the lab. But anyways, now what we're going to do is switch over to Microsoft Defender or the security portal here. Cool. So now we are in the Microsoft Defender or the security portal that you saw earlier on the M365 Admin Center. And for those of you who've never used this portal before, the first thing that I would tell you is that there is a lot of useful information that you can really have centralized here. I mean, one of the first things you see is a SOC optimization dashboard, and then you've got Sentinel automation, which currently I do not have any automation rules set up. That's probably going to be in a future video. And then it'll tell you about the data connectors. It'll give you a security score. So right now, my environment is absolutely not secure. And that's absolutely something that I'm going to be trying to change here in the coming videos. Then it gives you a tab on, I believe this is for Microsoft Defender for Identity. I still need to install a sensor actually on my domain controller and probably another server or endpoint that I have. And then it gives you information about device compliance and just a lot. There is a ton. Real quickly, what I want to do is go to the Assets tab and then show you the different devices that I have added to the portal. So here we've got 6 different endpoints. I've got my domain controller from the original Cybersecurity lab. I've got a couple of Windows 11 and 10 hosts. I have a Linux VM that I actually got from a home lab that I don't want to say ditched, but forgot about about 7 months ago, that I decided, hey, why don't I just go on here and add to Defender? So decided to do that. And then this is actually the device that triggered the alert, and it is a domain controller that is also a part of that lab that I just mentioned a couple seconds ago. But anyways, lots of different information. As you can see, it'll even give you like a risk level. This particular device is the one that triggered the alert, so it's got high exposure score right now. Or not exposure score, but exposure level, I guess you could say. Let's see here. Last device updated yesterday. Yeah, domain controller. It'll tell you a lot just by clicking here and really just looking through it personally. But as you can see, there's other tabs like endpoints, partners, APIs. We've got configuration management. Another thing that I like to do for this lab is run like an attack phishing training, something that I could push out to all of my quote unquote users, and then just go through the process of that and see how that works. Then of course you got cloud apps and cloud security, which essentially if you go to cloud discovery, what it'll do is it'll scan your environment and then look for behavioral patterns and cloud app usage, and then it will generate a list for you, and then you as an administrator can go in and say, okay, I want to block access to this, and I want to sanction access to this, and this. So very, very cool, very unique feature. But what I actually want to do right now is focus on incidents and alerts. So there should be a few open incidents, but the one that we actually want to focus on is the one that I mentioned earlier, and also the one that was pulled in by Sentinel, which was the execution incident on one endpoint. And as you can see, impacted asset was the domain controller from my older home lab. Detection sources, EDR. Last update time. But anyway, let's go on ahead and click on that incident. And as you can see, it already gives you a ton of different information, and it even gives you an incident graph. And so I don't want to overwhelm anybody that decides to watch this video, but one of the things that I'm going to do very quickly is go on ahead and close this out for starters. And then what we want to look at here is let's go from left to right. So we've got the attack story. As you can see here, you've got detection and categories. It's got 2 different active alerts, and then it'll even give you like a timeline for essentially what happens. So test alert, suspicious PowerShell command line, and the graph will tell you a few things here. So this is the affected endpoint or entity, as it would be officially called. It'll tell you that it was this is a loopback address 127.0.0.1. So essentially what this says is this PowerShell script or PowerShell execution, whatever you want to call it, was ran on this device by this user account here, administrator, which is the account that I was logged into. If you click on processes, you can view the two processes here, and it'll show you CMD and PowerShell. So what I want to go on ahead and tell you is that I did start off in the CMD and that I elevated to PowerShell. So the fact that Microsoft was able to immediately log this and immediately figure, okay, this was done on this machine is actually very, very impressive. But uh, I guess moving on, as you can see, I assigned this alert to myself under my ecorp.fit domain. It's got an incident ID. I haven't set a classification or anything like that yet. And I left the incident, well, I didn't leave a description, but what I did leave is some notes on the alert. So as you can see here, the incident description says, a suspicious PowerShell activity was observed on the machine. This behavior may indicate that PowerShell was used during installation, exploration, or in some cases lateral movement activities in which are used by attackers to invoke modules, download external payloads, or get more information about the system. And so another unique part about this is it'll give you really a lot of pieces of evidence without you even having to go in and investigate that yourself. So PowerShell, CMD, loopback address /exe, which tells me, okay, this device was ran locally and it wasn't used to remotely access any other sort of device. Of course, I can assume that based off of the information that I'm reading here, but I would still go through my investigative purposes by looking through logs and confirming that maybe this isn't sort of hidden sort of privilege escalation tactic. Of course, you always have to be open to different ideas and perspectives in cybersecurity. So, but another thing that I wanted to look at is this two notable MITRE tactics and techniques. So PowerShell and execution. So it's immediately referencing and essentially, I guess you could say, um, appending two different types of MITRE attacks, tactics, techniques, and procedures right here on the incident without me even having to go in and automatically link that. So that is amazing. And of course, there is a way that you can actually prevent this from even triggering if a similar alert were to show up in the future, which I believe would be through detection rules, which I will dig deeper into in future videos. All right, so moving on to the alert tab, what you'll see is a list of alerts that are relevant to this particular incident. So as you can see, there is a suspicious PowerShell command alert with a severity level assigned, the status, category, impacted assets. And there was actually another alert down here that I closed recently while I was testing around and just playing around with this particular incident here. But anyways, moving on to the next tab, you've got activities, and this is essentially the different activities pertaining to the incident. So of course I assigned the incident to myself, and then it also tells you about the alerts that were generated. So and then it gives them a category. So incident management, yeah, that appropriately belongs with changing the assignment of the incident. And then you've got performed by me, yours truly, and then Microsoft Defender for Endpoint performed. Essentially, it's saying Microsoft was the one that logged this incident based on their automated rules that they had in the back end already configured. So very, very useful. And the next tab, what you see is the assets log. So as you can see here, my Windows Server 2022 domain controller from the older home lab I mentioned earlier in the video. And it'll even give information like the exposure level, the OS that was used, related alerts, which would be all the alerts I have right now, etc. And then of course the user account that was used to log into the machine, which is even more useful, which is just the admin account. Nothing in investigation, so we'll skip over to evidence and response, and then I believe summary will just be pretty much a summation of all of these different tabs. But anyways, as you can see, it'll literally give you a timeline. So essentially what I did was I started off in the command prompt and then I elevated up to the PowerShell. Um, And for those of you who don't know, if you were to type just PowerShell into the CMD, what it will do is go on ahead and elevate you to the PowerShell CLI. Very, very useful. And then, of course, you could also see any IPs or URLs that were involved. So effectively, what we have is the loopback address, which means that the PowerShell execution was ran on itself and not invoked into any sort of endpoint. And then, of course, the summary pretty much summarizes everything that I just mentioned. So that is a very, very quick and brief rundown of the alert and the sorts of information that you can gather from Defender for Endpoint. And of course, if I were to go to Manage Incident, you can change the incident name. You can set the severity. In this case, I'll set it to informational. You've got active. Truth be told, this is no longer active. I'm actually going to go on ahead and resolve this. And then just for fun, I'll go on ahead and explain why I resolved this. So all right, and then as for the classification, we'll just put false positive, non-malicious, click save. All right, incident updated successfully. And so that's really about all I wanted to do for this particular video, but actually there are a couple more things that I wanted to show you here. So one, I wanted to show you where I have syslog configured for the pfSense, and I also wanted to show you the exact script that I ran from Microsoft. So I will go on ahead and do that now. So now we will navigate to the onboarding script. So from the Microsoft Defender homepage, all you really need to do is scroll down to where it says System, and go to Settings, and then from there what you want to do is go to Endpoints, and then scroll down again, and you will find Onboarding, and then the script that triggered the incident is actually this detection script here. And so what you would typically do, at least in this case, is just go to the script, copy it, and then what I'll do is open up a PowerShell instance. And then all this part of the script does is just make sure that the onboarding package above it worked. But for the sake of the video, I won't run that a second time as the device is already enrolled. But for here, you would just paste it, press enter, and then it should close automatically. And apparently when I did that on this machine the first time, it's what triggered that alert. So anyways, now we'll go on ahead and show you the syslog configuration. All right, and now we are back into our Ubuntu syslog box, and what we're going to do is navigate to pfSense. All right, log in to the admin portal here. And FYI, for those of you who have paid attention to the previous, or I guess the other alternative home lab that I had at this point, this same Ubuntu box here is actually a part of the eCorp LAN, and that eCorp LAN has a subnet of 10.0.1.1. So this box in particular has an IP address of 10.0.1.9. Just so the pfSense can communicate with it and use it as the actual syslog host. So what we'll do now is go to status, and then we will go down to where it says, I believe it's system logs. Then we will go to settings, and then now we can look at the syslog configurator. So again, I have it hosted at two different locations, or pointed to two different locations. So this is my Splunk server, which is my Windows 11 host in my eCorp lab, and then we've got the 10.0.1.9, both pointed towards UDP port 514, which is commonly used for syslog. But anyways, now that I've shown you that, that's pretty much going to be everything for this demonstration. Again, just going through Microsoft Sentinel, ingesting data from the various connectors I have to this point, going over syslog, even taking the time to go over a PowerShell execution alert. I would say that pretty much summarizes what I wanted to accomplish for this video. And the next video is probably going to be a little bit more advanced, where I actually go over maybe some attack surface reduction, as well as some additional data collection rules, as well as configuring um, a means of actually suppressing certain alerts from coming through, as that can minimize false positives. Those are just some ideas anyway, but as usual, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.